Maybe well, if it starts flashing, let me know. That means the battery. We even had people crawling out of the woods today. The Feigs were camping as of this morning, and here they are. We have some that look like they were crawling out of the woods this morning. Pray for Lily. She got poison ivy here recently, and so she's been a trooper with that, and we feel bad for her, but she gets it real bad, and thought she just had marker on her face a couple days ago, and it just keeps getting worse. She's a good sport about it. She's got a good sense of humor, and we appreciate that. 1 Corinthians, I'm in the wrong sermon. It's not good. There we go, chapter 6. You almost heard the same one over again from last week. He says, when one of you has a grievance against another, does he dare go to the law before the unrighteous instead of the saints? Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to try trivial cases? Do you not know that we are to judge angels? How much more than matters pertaining to this life? So if you have such cases, why do you lay them before those who have no standing in the church? I say this to your shame. Can it be that there is no one among you wise enough to settle a dispute between brothers? But brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers? To have lawsuits at all with one another is already a defeat for you. Why not rather suffer wrong? Why not rather be defrauded? But you yourselves wrong and defraud even your own brothers. Father, I pray for wisdom, something that is called for again and again in this book, not just to understand it, but because there's such a lack of it in churches. And if we're not careful, we can behave immaturely and lack wisdom. And so, Father, as we go through another instance of this in the Corinthian church, I pray that we would be more mature. We would think maturely, clearly, and spiritually mature about these issues. So, Father, give us the grace to do that. It's in Christ's name I pray. Amen. And I forgot to invite Jacob up, so I'm going to have him come up and sort of do an intervening scripture reading in Leviticus 19, 17 through 18. Leviticus 19, 17 through 18.
You shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord.
All right, thank you, Jacob. In the last couple of weeks, I've seen a couple of football games, one in NFL, one in a college game, where a football player has the football, they're about to run into the end zone and score, but they don't. They stop. They either stop and kneel the ball, ending the play, or they slide and end the play, just on the edge of the goal line. Strange, isn't it? Why would somebody do this? Had they temporarily gone insane? Had they forgotten what they were doing? No. In fact, them doing this came with the praise of the coaching staff. So why did they do it? Because that player wanted to guarantee a win. They wanted to guarantee a win. Because scoring a touchdown at that point could actually lose them the game. You see it, at least in one case, for instance, the team of the player who slid instead of scored was down by 6 points. A touchdown with an extra point, something pretty easy to get after a touchdown, that would give them the 7 points that they needed to be up by 1 point. So as the game in the fourth quarter is coming to a conclusion, this player would score a touchdown, they'd kick the extra point, and then they would have that point that they needed to win the game. But they're only up by 1 point. And so if the other team got the ball that fast and were able to get it back, all they need is a field goal to win the game. So The player scores the touchdown, the other team gets the ball, and they can march down to the 40 or 30-yard line, kick a field goal, and it's a loss for the other team. And so the player stops before the end zone, just inches before crossing the goal line, and decides, I'm going to not score yet, since time is what the other team needs. I'm not going to score. I'm going to kneel it here. We'll waste the clock, then push in for that last 2 inches, and then kick the field goal and win the game. And they did. Did you know, as a believer, you can win in the short term but lose the game? As a believer, you can win in the short term and lose the game. When I saw that player do that, I was watching. It wasn't even the Packers. It was a Sunday night game, I think last Sunday night. I commented out loud to Jenny, that was a very unselfish thing that person did. Now, I've tried to get Jenny to watch football with me. It's been a lifelong prayer. I've been on my knees about it, asking God, please, please, please let her become a football fan. It's just not working. I have to reconcile with that in my life. But I explained to her why it was important. But I said, hey, that was a very unselfish thing to do. And about 5 seconds later, the commentator says, that was a very unselfish thing for that player to do. It's like, see? Anyways, I'm getting off track here. But why was it unselfish? Well, of course, that would pad his stats. That would make him look good. Everyone would be cheering. I don't know if you know this, but NFL players get massive bonuses. Depending on their contract, they can get massive bonuses. We're talking $500,000, $1 million, sometimes more for scoring a touchdown or for getting a sack. So now, maybe they work that out after. I don't know. But for the sake of the team, he did something that was unselfish. As believers, we can have a victory that has an immediate benefit for us, but it actually is an overall defeat. So we want to be careful. In order for a player who does thousands of drills a week just to get the ball in his hands and into the end zone, to stop and think in an intense moment and consider the greater good of his actions, to consider the long-term win in that moment and the good of his teammates, in order for him to do this, he needs to possess, among other things, maturity and faith. He needs to have the maturity to think beyond the moment. He needs to have the faith that his actions will pay off down the road. He needs to think of others in the overall game he's playing and what he's trying to do. So here we are, we're back in Corinth in a church that has declared themselves to be wise and mature. And Paul has already shown this not to be true. They know a lot of things which seem to indicate that they are spiritual, but in fact, he says they're infants and they're behaving according to the flesh. And we've seen this very starkly displayed in the chapter that we just left. Here you have a man engaging openly in immorality to a degree the Gentiles don't even accept. And yet you have 10,000 guides and all the conferences and speakers that you listen to and go to, and yet you're allowing this. That's a sign of immaturity. Well, we're going to see this immaturity manifest on another level. Short-term wins for a long-term defeat. Specifically, thinking only about what benefits them for this life and not what is good for the eternal spiritual game and war that we ought to be waging. They're immature. They're thinking, give me what I deserve or else. When we were in Maryland, the commercials on TV were just awful. I mean, they just, you'd have these lawyer commercials. No offense, Jeff. I talk about lawyers a lot here. These lawyer commercials for these big firms come on, and this one was not for that. It was for cash advance, and they would come on and they'd say stuff like, "It's my money and I want it now. Get your cash today. It's my money," and they would just say that mantra over and over and over again. That's kind of what's going on here. It's my money and I want it now. Not thinking about any of the consequences of getting that money. And here, they're thinking, give me what I deserve or else. It's my right. So in the case of the Corinthians, this showed up as lawsuits against other believers. And we're going to just spend a lot of time discussing this. But as you go through the text with me, I also want you to think that this is not just about legal issues. Okay? If you think, I don't want to get into a lawsuit with somebody, or this is probably not going to happen to me, so I'm just going to think about the nice-smelling, crock pot meals and everything that people brought. Don't do that. This is for all of us. So besides actual legal issues, there's other areas in which I might be thinking about the short-term game while losing the long-term spiritual war. Or are there tugs of the flesh that drive me to make decisions that are not born out of love and destroy good in the lives of others? Okay, and I've brought some of these up before, and if you think back to our very first message or the second message from the series, there's these things where we ask the question, is that winning? You lose your temper at someone in your family to make an immediate annoyance go away. You fixed the annoyance. You fixed the short-term problem while setting aside the fruit of the Spirit. Or going up to a coach and demanding playing time for your kid, even if you're right, but you're making it clear to that coach, hey, if this continues, you're going to have a problem with me. Making it clear at your workplace that if you don't get what you think you deserve, they'll regret it, so people learn to give you what you want or else. I'm going to contend that we have many cases in which we can get the short-term win but lose the long-term battle. I don't think this passage is applicable just to lawsuits, but it does demonstrate winning may not always be winning. Winning may not always be winning because we're playing for the long game. We're playing a different game. You see the bumper sticker, he who dies with the most toys wins. That's not the game that we're playing, right? Absolutely not. We're playing a different game. We're playing a spiritual game, a spiritual warfare. So we're going to look at this issue of bringing other believers to court and see several reasons why it's bad. And I hope along the way you can see how this is a template for other issues between believers. So verse 1. When one of you has a grievance against another, does he dare go to the law before the unrighteous instead of the saints? No, the first reason, and I've got a bunch of them here, so we'll go pretty quickly. The first reason why it's bad is it's bad because you're asking unbelievers to judge spiritual matters. It's bad because you're asking unbelievers to judge spiritual matters. So in the church of Corinth, people were having disputes with one another, and rather than working it out between themselves or within the church, they were taking each other to court. And Paul, as their spiritual father, is not happy about this. The verse actually, if you read it in the Greek, actually starts with the word dare. Dare any of you having an issue against another go to a judge. He's straightforward with this. Are you serious? You would dare go to an unbeliever about a spiritual matter? You might be thinking, well, it's a legal matter. We'll get to that. Stop and think. Don't just rush to the goal line because it's going to give you an immediate win. Now, we've got a lot to cover here, and I want to get a couple of objections out of the way, one more than the other. Suppose you have a legal issue with somebody else. They've swindled you out of something, or they've damaged your property, or they've breached a contract and not paid you half of what they owe you, and you pursue legal action against them. And then in the middle of it, they go, hold up. I'm a Christian. You can't sue me. Is Paul's admonition then, all right, drop the case? They said they're a Christian. That's the end of it. Okay, I've heard this argument made before, and I don't actually agree with it. Okay? Here's why. First of all, anybody can say anything about themselves, okay? Anybody can say, I'm a Christian. So if they're looking at this as some sort of loophole to get you off their back, that's not just. It's not right. Secondly, if somebody says that they are a Christian, in relation to a lawsuit, then they also, with that, if that's the argument they're making, then they must also submit themselves to what it means to be a Christian in the context of a church in order to fulfill this passage. In other words, you say, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, well, then let's meet and we'll talk spiritually about this. Well, no, I don't want to do that. I don't trust you. Okay, I can understand that. We don't know each other real well. Then how about you get somebody wise from your congregation and I'll get somebody wise from my congregation and we'll come and we'll meet. No, I don't want to do that. Well, can I talk to your pastor? No, you're not going to talk to my pastor about this. Well, then what you're claiming here is irrelevant. The I'm a Christian card means nothing. It means either you're not a Christian and you're just using that card to get out of jail free or get out of lawsuit free, or you're a Christian who doesn't believe the scriptures and thereby is not willing to live by it, and therefore I have to assume, I don't know if you're a Christian. I'm not going to apply the same rules to you, okay? So I bring that up to say this, all civil disputes between people labeled themselves Christians are now off the table. I don't agree with that. I don't think that matches what's here in the scriptures. Secondly, look at what he says. He says, does he dare go to the law before the unrighteous instead of the saints? I don't think Paul is saying that it's ever wrong to go before an unsaved judge because they will be unrighteous in all their judgments. I don't think that's what Paul is saying here. Okay? For instance, you can watch Judge Judy or Judge Joe Brown, or you can go sit in court with somebody that doesn't know the Lord, and you can go, that's right. What they said, their ruling was right. I mean, that I'm not saying Judge Judy's right every time, but, you can look at it and you can go, that was correct, their assessment of the situation, and I agree with that. Paul's not saying that every unsaved judge just does an unjust thing. That's not his point. But what I believe what he is saying is that they're not going to judge matters according to spiritual criteria. That is not their job. They will only seek to settle a matter according to what the state law says or the federal law says. That judge will not take it further according to what is good and right before God. That's not their job. And we'll talk about this more in a few minutes. But you bringing this issue before a judge, Paul is saying you're fundamentally bringing a spiritual issue at its core between two people that should be filled with the Spirit for somebody who's not indwelt with the Spirit to solve your problem. You get that? You're bringing something that is fundamentally spiritual at its core to an unsaved, unspirit-indwelt person to solve the spiritual matter. This is not good. This is not good. And we'll talk about that more in a minute here. So it's bad because you're asking an unbeliever to judge spiritual matters, but also it's bad because it belittles your calling. Look at verse number 2 and 3. Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And that if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to try trivial cases, literally small cases? Do you not know that we are to judge angels? How much more, then, matters pertaining to this life? What is Paul saying here? He's saying that if God has equipped them and is fitting them to one day be able to judge matters so much more consequential, at such a higher level and of greater importance than these things, can't you judge small matters between believers in the church? So what is this judgment of the world and of angels that Paul's talking about? You don't have to turn there, but if you want to, Revelation 2:26, Christ, speaking to the churches, says, "The one who conquers and keeps my works until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron, as when earthen pots are broken in pieces, even as myself I myself have received authority from my Father. So he's going to delegate world authority to you. That's what he's saying. Christ is going to delegate world authority to you. That's your future position. He says again in Revelation 20, verse 6, "Blessed and holy is the one who shares in the first resurrection. Over such, the second death has no power, but they will be priests of God and of Christ, and they will reign with him for 1,000 years during this millennial kingdom." Your job is going to be to rule and reign along with Christ. So you're going to have a position of authority, a position of judgment, a position of wisdom, a position of discernment. That's your future job. And you can't handle a property dispute or a dent in somebody's car or a contract issue between believers? Give me a break. Now, what is he talking about regarding the angels? I don't know. Let's move on with the text, okay? No, I really don't know. I don't know what he's saying. But I don't actually think it really lessens the impact. Okay? Now, could he be saying you're involved in the final judgment of the fallen angels? Possibly. We also have these weird pictures in Scripture. I say weird, but it's weird to us, where it says the sons of God came to present themselves before God in Job, and Satan was among them. So there's this mingling somehow between these different spirits. Or when Michael and Satan disputed over the body of Moses, there's questions there. I don't know if he's saying. I don't think he's saying that the holy angels are involved in sin. But somehow we have then been placed above the angels. Remember, Christ was made a little lower than the angels. That's what Psalm says. It says, I believe again in Hebrews. And we are in Christ, and when Christ is resurrected and we're ruling and reigning with him, we have now been placed above angels. So he's saying that you as believers are going to have authority over beings that are right now higher than you. Can't you settle these matters between yourself? God has equipped you with his Spirit. He's equipped you with wisdom and the tools needed and his word to settle these issues. So you should be able to settle. It's sort of like, let's say you own a company and your son worked for you and he was getting into a petty dispute with another coworker. You said something like, "Don't you know that you're going to run this company someday?" Now, that might be a total revelation to him. Just like maybe the angels thing was a revelation to the Corinthians. I didn't know that. But it doesn't lessen the impact. Don't you realize you're going to have authority over all? Can't you deal with this issue between the two of you? Don't be petty. Deal with it maturely. So before we open our mouth or send that text or email or make it an issue of something, think, is my behavior befitting of someone sitting alongside the throne of Christ and exercising wisdom to carefully deal with issues with men and of angels? Maybe I should rethink this. Backspace. Delete. Maybe there's a different way about this. So it's bad because it's belittling. It belittles your calling. It's also bad because it bypasses spiritual issues. Now, we talked about how the fact that it brings unspiritual things or spiritual things before unspiritual people. I want to see here how this going to a secular court, an unbelieving court, meant to handle matters of civil dispute, is bypassing spiritual issues that need to be dealt with. So he says in verse 4, "So if you have such cases," the Greek again is, so if you have these little cases, these small cases, if you have these small cases, why do you then lay them before those who have no standing in the church? I've said on at least two levels. You're bringing in matters that involve spiritual issues before a court that is not spiritual. And you're bringing matters that should stay within the family of God. We're going to see that in verse 7 here in a minute. But he says that these people have no standing. He's not insulting judges. There's wonderful judges out there that are doing God's work as the ministers of God, okay? They might not even be saved, but they're doing God's work. He's not criticizing them, saying that they have no brains in their head. That's not what he's saying. He's saying they're in the wrong realm. They're dealing in the wrong realm. That word no standing is often translated as despised or rejected or disregarded. In other words, it's unqualified. It's not meant to be in that realm. You have no business bringing someone into a matter that they have no business judging. It's like if you asked a Collin County judge to make a decision in the Canadian Supreme Court. Like, you have no standing in the Canadian Supreme Court. It doesn't make you an idiot. It doesn't make you unwise. That's not your realm. They have no regard, no honor, no place there. They should be rejected as an option before even ever having the opportunity. They're not Canadian. They're not versed in Canadian law or can judge issues in a Canadian realm. As Christians, when our only concern is being legally right, we bypass so many spiritual issues and the demand for maturity. Because it's not just about the contract. Why are there petty issues like this? And I think this will get to these spiritual issues. James 4, verse 1 says, "What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you?" Right away, spiritual issue right there. It's not that the two of you are at war with each other. It's that your passions are at war within you. That you really, 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 really want something. And that thing that you want is not the thing that God wants, most of all. So he says, you desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. Believers who have to engage each other in a worldly court do so because they don't have the maturity to deal with it amongst themselves. Children are like this, right? They have the small, and I'm not saying all of my children all the time, okay? So guys, I'm proud of you. You've grown so much in this area. But as these little ones are coming up, the smallest matter becomes, Mom? Dad? What is it now? What is it now? And they bring you into, she's sitting too close to me. And as a maturing, tool, sometimes you say, if I have to solve this, you're going to regret it. You're all going to lose something. So do you think you can solve this between the two of you or the three of you without me getting involved? And often, magically, that problem is solved. It encourages maturity, right? But this is what children do. They decide, since we're not mature enough to deal with it, and again, I'm really thankful for that. You guys are maturing so much in this issue, okay? But as they haven't matured yet, they have to bring in an outside authority to be referee. Maturity in matters of dispute, in matters of wrong being done, violation of contract or agreement, includes listening. It includes considering the other person's point of view. It includes admitting for the parts that you are wrong. It includes weighing what is just. Maturity includes charting a course of action on how to go from here when there's been a mess. It includes being accountable to stick with that course of action. And we could go on. And by the way, I meant to say this earlier. I think I brushed over or went past it. There are issues in which the law should get involved even between Christians, okay? And here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about abuse, violence, criminal activity. God is a minister in those issues. God has given a minister in those issues, and that is the government, okay? So I'm not saying if somebody has been abused physically or otherwise that the government should have no involvement, okay? That's not the issues that he's talking about here. Okay, let me just get that out of the way. He's talking about probably money, probably property, probably time, work, stuff that you've agreed to that somebody didn't fulfill. But above these just purely, generally mature issues, there's spiritual considerations. You see, you bring a matter before court and they go, okay, pay him the $4,500 you owe him, case dismissed, gone, go. That's all they care about. You pay him what you owe. Have they solved a spiritual issue? Are they going to go back and be like, well, I'm glad we did that. Let's go out to lunch. Is that what you're going to see in a church? No. That is not going to solve the issue. When does forgiveness and mercy come into play? What if this is the fourth time this has happened? If I have the right to demand retribution, is the spiritual choice to always pursue it? Even if something is made right in the balances of justice, what spiritual matters are still at play? Maybe there was greed at the root of this. He talks about it's not just the immoral, but it's the greedy, the swindlers, etc. in his list, the idolaters. Maybe in the midst of this, there was a choice to actually cheat someone. Has that spiritual issue been dealt with? Well, it wasn't dealt with in court, I can guarantee you that. What idols are in the person's life that led to this behavior? How has the matter gone beyond simple justice, and how has it now reached reconciliation between Christian siblings? What other works of the flesh happened during the dispute on both sides of the issue? Anger, malice, wrath, gossip, lying. You see, they're not going to care about those things in court. We should care about them. Those are higher issues than $4,500 or whatever the issue may be. Since these are matters of a Christian family, what do we need to do going forward for there to be true peace and goodwill between everybody involved rather than just a ceasefire or a settling of accounts? See, an immature Christian will aim to bypass all of these things. Why? Perhaps it is over embarrassment. Perhaps it is because of fear. Some Christians are so caught up with putting on a face of I'm everybody's friend, or I don't want anybody to think I'm petty. I don't want to look bad if someone hears that I have a dispute with another brother and sister. So instead, they will decide to be quietly resentful or bitter or disdainful of someone else instead of dealing with it. They will actually lie and say that everything's okay when it's not. I'm not saying that you can't say, hey, you know what, I'm going to let this one go. Love covers a multitude of sins. That's applicable here, okay? In fact, I would lean towards that in general. But there are some things, real bad things happen between people, right? Somebody's in a bad moment, and they break contract, they do things wrong to somebody else, and they need to be dealt with. And so it doesn't help when we lie to one another and be like, no, I'm fine. And deep down, I hate that person. I don't want to ever see that person. I don't want to be around that person. I don't want to sit near that person. I'm sick of that person. I'm ready to put my dukes up whenever there is anything else with that person. That is not dealing with a spiritual issue. That's just avoidance. It's lying. People do wrong things to each other, even in the church. And if the response is because I'm afraid of a mess, or I'll just pack my bags and go somewhere else. Shake the dust off my feet and head somewhere, or instead of working it out, or I'll just deal with it. Just hold that resentment inside. This is not leading to health in the body. The Bible says, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor. In fact, Ephesians 4:15 says, rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ. That's talking about maturing. Maturity doesn't happen unless we're honest, unless we have awkward, very uncomfortable phone calls or meetings or cups of coffee or conversations. It doesn't cause us to mature when we avoid all of those things. So if somebody's done you wrong in the church, another Christian, don't bypass the spiritual issues due to immaturity, due to avoidance. You can forgive them with love, but sometimes that's not even the best thing. You can say, hey, I don't really want to pursue this, but you know what? This is the third time this person has done this, and I want to be a help to them. Maybe because I don't want them to do it to somebody else. I don't want them to be immature. So, can I talk to you? And I want you to know that I love you so much, and this thing happened, and it has bothered me, but I don't want to make an issue of it. But I am concerned that there's a pattern of behavior in your life that this keeps happening. That's what we should do for the good of the other person. Now, sometimes that means we let it happen 15 times, depending on what it is, But sometimes it's like, this is the second time something really big has happened, and it's going to cause major problems if it continues to happen. It's an area of spiritual immaturity in your life that I'm concerned about. Or I don't want to get to the point where I'm just fed up with you. So let's talk. Let's talk about this. You bypass the process of spiritual growth when you respond immaturely, and you lay out your dirty laundry in front of the world. Fifthly, it's bad because it is a bad testimony, and that's the laying out of the laundry. Now look at verse 5. He says, I say this to your shame. Can it be that there is no one among you wise enough to settle a dispute between the brothers? But brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers? It's bad because it's a bad testimony. Paul says I'm not happy. I'm saying this to your shame. You're not doing good. They, in all their teaching and wisdom, should be able to handle this. Just imagine to this church who's prided themselves on wisdom and maturity when they hear, isn't there anybody wise enough among you? Oof. Imagine the knife to their heart. Here's a church that thought they were wise enough to handle anything. And then he says, this is between brothers. This is just some other random person. Which, by the way, as much as lies within you, Paul says, live peaceably with all men. It doesn't mean that we get to have no lawsuits within the church, but then gloves off for anybody else. As much as lies within you, live peaceably with all men. That doesn't mean lawsuits don't ever exist. What I'm saying is, exercise wisdom as much as possible to make the problem go away, to make peace with your neighbor outside of the court, just as much as possible. But certainly between brothers and sisters. This is a family matter. And when we drag our issues before the court, it says so many things to an unbelieving world. You see, we're supposed to be the people of God before a lost world who's in sin. We are supposed to be the light, the people with hope, the people whom Christ has transformed to live in a divine way. This is the testimony we are to carry. So what is an unbeliever supposed to think of Christianity when they witness this, when the judge sees it, when the jury sees it, when people read the case law, when it hits the newspapers, when it gets around? What are they supposed to think? You're those two Christians in the same church. They're in court today. Some hope they have. We have salespeople that will come to our business from time to time and advertise their product or service. Now, they're supposed to be the answer to our problems. They're supposed to be the value we're looking for, right? That's what they're selling. And imagine two of the employees come in and they hand us their pamphlet. You can see they're irritated with one another, and they say, hey, instead of talking about our product, can you just help us settle a matter between us? You see, he doesn't like driving long distances, and so he thinks that I'm supposed to not only drive all the time, but it has to be in my car on my gas. Help us out here. How likely do you think it is that I'm going to buy their product or service? Zero. It's not going to happen. If you guys can't work out this between you, you're definitely not here to solve any other of my problems. It's embarrassing. Or if Apple sent Samsung employees, or their employees over to Samsung for an HR issue, you'd be like, what? Get your house together. Why are you going to us? I think that's what the world thinks when Christians go to suit against each other. I also think, by the way, it's Christians when they just trash each other on social media, where we have to duke out all of our issues in public. I'm not saying things don't need to be called out. That's sometimes actually the best thing, where you say, hey, brother, you're in public here and you're not acting like one. You're not acting like a brother. This is inappropriate. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. But I don't think it helps the name of Christ before the world when we can't or refuse to deal with issues in the church. Sixthly, it's bad because we're in the same family. Okay, look at 6:7. 6:7. All right, sorry. I just felt like you needed that break. If you haven't been on social media lately, you ask the kids. Sorry. It's that extra hour sleep. It's making me do weird things. All right, chapter 6, verse 7. Starting with verse 6. But brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers. To have lawsuits at all with one another is already a defeat for you. Why not rather suffer wrong? Why not rather be defrauded? But you yourselves wrong and defraud even your own brothers. So he drills down even more. If you have to come to the point where you are solving the matter, instead of solving a matter on a personal level, you have to sue somebody, you've already lost as church members and believers. You've already lost. You're one party or the other or both has led to a situation where you can't work things out without getting out contracts and legal. I'm not saying getting out a contract is wrong, all right? But where you can't sit down with a contract and be like, oh yeah, you're right. Or there was some confusion here, and I don't know how to solve this. It's $10,000, and I don't want to do you wrong. What if we bring a third person in on this, and just get some other opinion? Sure. But when you have to get to the point where you're bringing each other to court, he said you've lost already. How is it a loss? One or both parties have not sought the other's best interest. You have failed to love. Likely, someone has been selfish or unrighteous to bring it to this point. Likely, there is bitterness. Likely, there is a refusal to settle this through calm and considerate conversation. Likely, there is some major distrust. You've already lost. Then beyond this, by taking someone to court, you are saying, I would rather, in order to get what I'm owed, drag my brother's name along with my Savior's name through this mess before others than to suffer whatever loss might occur to me. I would rather do that. I'd rather be right. I'd rather have my money and cause all this damage. That's what I would rather have. It's like the football player saying, I'd rather step across the goal line and get praise and lose this game. That's an immature thing to do. That's a selfish thing to do. You've lost. You've lost. And he uses that language here. It's already a defeat for you. You've lost. Even Walmart understands this. I say even Walmart, they're an amazing company. But, Walmart would rather have somebody steal from them and walk out with some detergent or DVDs under their arm than to have their reputation tarnished by the police showing up every time for petty theft. They've made that decision. I'm not saying it's a good decision because it has now encouraged a lot of theft and bad things to happen. But I'm saying they get it on a worldly level. They get it. It would be better for us to just let that money go, whatever profits we've lost on that. It'd be better for us to just let that go for the sake of our reputation, for the sake of the rest of the customers, than to blow everything up and risk damage and liability and injury and negative publicity. Again, I'm not saying that's the right decision altogether. I'm saying take it to a Christian level and say, wouldn't it be better, as Paul's saying, to just suffer the loss than to do such catastrophic damage to the name of Christ, to your church, to your brother? And we've been over this, church. There are mechanisms by which we can deal with these things as well in the Scriptures. Matthew 18 gives us this. If you have something against your brother, you can deal with that. You can take it to them. And the church can be involved. And perhaps it is just a misunderstanding. Perhaps it is, I wasn't expecting this loss, and I guess I read the contract wrong, and let's work it out in a charitable way. Maybe the person needs a payment plan. Do you see what I'm saying? If we handle this as if we're family and not drag it before the whole world, we've won. We've won. But to do otherwise is a loss? Wouldn't you rather suffer, be wronged, and be defrauded? That means to be deprived. Lose some money rather than lose the fruit of the Spirit? Lose your testimony? Just in closing, Proverbs says, it's an honor for a man to keep aloof from strife, but every fool will be quarreling. I'm not saying that you can't ever be drugged into something that you didn't want to be in. But I think as Christians, we can do a lot of preventative maintenance by our relationship with one another, by keeping things loving, so that when something does come up, we go, I know you. I had somebody that worked for us said, hey, I'm really sorry I didn't. I'm like, hey, look, I know you. I know you weren't trying to take advantage. I know you. That's what we want to do with each other. We're family. So if we got a problem, let's work it out as family. And let's honor the name of Christ in these kind of matters. Father, I pray that we would have the mentality to win the game, not to just simply get temporary victory and advantage. Father, I pray that our actions would be done out of love. You'd help us to be careful, help us to be wise, help us to be humble, help us to have awkward conversations as needed. And Father, I just thank you for this family. I thank you for this church family that you've brought together. Pray that love would be the testimony of this church. We would exude in wisdom because we're seeking the things that are